Welcome back to Star Narratives, the podcast. This is your go-to for accessible and relatable astrology designed to help you understand your inner workings and spiritual awakening. I'm your host, Natha Perkins. Hi, everybody. Welcome to another week. I'm Natha. This week, we are continuing on in Gemini season. We're going to be talking about the shadow side of Gemini. I think we've all seen that there are certain astrology signs that get a bad rap. One of them definitely being Gemini. There are a lot of people that have a lot of complaints about people that they have loved, people that they have been in relationship with that have been Gemini, but I'm always here to advocate and say it's not necessarily a single sign that makes somebody problematic, but with every single sign, there are the problem sides of the sign. So we're going to talk about that today. And if you are new to this podcast, in season 5, I am taking different facets of every single sun sign as the sun is in that sign. So we're doing it in real time and I'm breaking it down for you. So these episodes are interesting if you are trying to learn more astrology and understand it. But on a deeper level, these are also teachings that are meant to help you understand yourself better. Astrology is a really cool organizing tool for the human psyche, meaning that, yes, you can look at the archetypes of the planets and the signs, etc., but they all relate really specifically to the way that we are all very similar. We all have predictable crises and predictable experiences, especially that will correlate with these signs as planets are either moving through them in the sky or in our natal chart. So you can listen to these teachings to self-explore. I ask you plenty of questions that are designed to help you see yourself better and probably get to know the people in your life a little bit better too. If you like my style and you want to book a private reading, you can find me at electraastrology.com. I also offer astrology mentorships if you want to learn more astrology, or if you are a practitioner in some sort of healing modality and would like to just bring some basic astrology knowledge in so that you can support your clients by knowing a little bit about how to read their chart. And then I also have apprenticeships if you want to make astrology a business. I also have zodiac journals. You can find those on Amazon. And one more thing, I do a forecast at the end of the teachings. So these are weekly forecasts. It's designed to help you understand how to use the astrological energies of the week. But you can listen to these episodes in evergreen form. If you have missed some of the previous episodes, I started at Sagittarius. I recommend going back, even if you only listen to the first half, where we do the teaching. And then, of course, you can always check back and say, what was I doing on January 15th? I'm going to listen to that forecast and try to make some sense of it because we learn a lot, probably a lot more in hindsight than we do when we're going through the actual experience. All right, well, let's get started. One of the big pieces of Gemini that I've been talking about through the last few weeks is that it does relate to the mind and the way that you use your mind, the way that you process information and come up with facts that inform your experience, that create your perception of your life. So we need the mind. The stronger our mind is, the better we're probably going to do in our lives, just because we are living in a time where we need our minds to help us process things and get us from A to Z, and also to help us understand what's real. There's so much subterfuge right now that's happening through all of these various media channels and these ways that we all ingest media that makes it hard to know what's real. Using that Gemini mind can oftentimes really help you to make sense and sort through all of the information. There's so much. But Gemini does have a shadow, and there are many forms of this shadow. So we'll start off, first of all, you've heard me talking about the fact that, our minds are unreliable. They generally have motivation to make us do certain things, keep things moving smoothly. You'll probably relate to this. Your mind will generate anxiety, thoughts. Did I do this? Did I call that person? Did I return that email? Did I go to the store and buy that thing? So our minds are always coming up with tasks for us, things to make sure that we get done. Although a lot of times our mind will bring us straight into anxiety. One thing that you want to be really aware of when you're dealing with your mind is how to control your mind. So we think about mind control and we think, oh God, that's scary. Like no mind control, but that's a bad thing. But the truth is that we have to learn how to control our own minds. Otherwise, they can get the best of us. Our brains can come in and send us into these anxiety goose chases where suddenly we're thinking about things, exerting all of this energy on something that doesn't actually matter, something that's not actually important at all. We're looking this month at tuning in to how your mind runs you. And I asked you in the last episode, I asked you to name your overacting mind, and we jokingly nicknamed it Jack. What has Jack been pulling you to do? And how does Jack, I asked you this last week, how does Jack come in and try to control you? Because this is where you are working to do what it takes to keep Jack in line. We only have so much energy and we only have so much time in a day. And it's not best spent with this busyness. The busyness of mind keeps us really exhausted. And we all know at the end of the day how tiring it is just to get through everything that we're supposed to get through. And in the way the world works now, where we have cell phones and text messages coming in constantly, we have messages from social media, emails. Many of us have several email accounts, constant information incoming. And unless we are on top of how to file that information so that we can look at it in useful ways, then we are spending way too much mental energy that we then don't have it in our mental bank account to spend on the things that are important. Now, remember that Gemini, ruled by Mercury, has a desire to keep the story going, to keep moving. It is a mutable sign. All of the mutable signs, Gemini, Virgo, Sagittarius, and Pisces, all have a desire to be able to flow. So the mind is going to flow one way or the other. There's no way really to stop that. Sometimes people have meditations that are designed to slow down the mind or stop the mind altogether. Those are successful for certain kinds of brains, not for others. But we want to take into account that the mind is going to flow. And when we're talking about the shadow, we have to talk about the fact that with Gemini, there can be a sense of saying one thing to one person, saying something else to another, thinking one thing about a piece of information over here, totally changing our mind about it as we're talking to somebody else. There is this duality, and we talk about Gemini as the twins. So there's always this tendency with our brains to be able to split. Sometimes that's a gift and a skill, right? If you have a job where you need to multitask or you have a ton of kids, like it's great to be able to hold several different pieces of information and tasks all in your head and be able to implement on them at the same time. But it can be really easy with Gemini because we want to keep the story going. And remember, we all have Gemini somewhere in our charts. So you don't have to have a strong set of planetary energies in your chart that are Gemini in order to be dealing with this. We're all dealing with this. This is the nature of the mind. Sometimes our minds come in and they betray us because it's like, well, I made this commitment to be with this one person. And then I also made a commitment to be with that person. Now somehow I've got to please them both. We know that with Gemini, there can be a tendency to tell little white lies where we don't want to get mired in the consequences of like, oh God, now I'm going to be in trouble because I double booked. Instead, there is that desire to just keep everything flowing. So it's like, oh, so sorry. I can't because da 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 da. And oh, well, what if I said it like this? So, something that you want to be aware of when you're working with Gemini are those places where you end up getting in your own way because you understand on some level that in order for you to tell the truth about what's happening, that it's going to stall you out. You're going to have to stop and do some damage control. You're going to have to do some repair. And the nature of Gemini is like, I don't want to do that. I don't want to slow down. The trick for that is being aware of any tendencies that you have to double book, to overschedule, to speak out of both sides of your mouth, to tell people varying versions of the same story in order to keep everybody happy. Because remember, Gemini is also connected to communication. We're going to talk about that next week. The way that we communicate with people is a really important way of making the most out of all of our brain power so that we are not exhausted zombie like by the end of the day. We have to learn how to communicate really effectively, say it like it is, and keep moving, as opposed to skirting the issue, telling little white lies, because that ends up taking up way more mental space. And we want to be able to use our mind in its best capacity, which is not being anxious about getting busted. It's not freaking out about something that didn't get done. It's not figuring out creative ways for dealing with people. It's learning how to go in with precision, do what needs to be done. Gossip. This is also a Libra thing. This can also be an Aquarius thing. All of the air signs are relational in nature. So this is a relationship sign. All of these archetypes have ways that they are trying to avoid having to deal with the heavy stuff. Gemini, in particular, hates being bored and will try to stir up some excitement through things like gossiping. So you want to watch that too. You don't want to be the one that's busted for talking behind somebody's back. So remember, the mind is very busy. Slow down for a minute right now and just think about how many times has your mind wandered while I've been talking? Or if you're like me, how many times have you had to hit the back button because you realize you just missed something? Begin to notice how this happens to you on a regular basis. How often does your mind take you on a little adventure when you're in the middle of a conversation or you're in the middle of listening to something or watching something? I think that's one reason why social media is so popular, because it only demands seconds worth of attention. And so our attention spans are getting shorter because of media. Our ability to sit and absorb something in continuity is diminishing. So begin to notice that this week. How quickly does your brain take off? And suddenly you are on another planet. You're in another dimension. You're thinking about something from the past, thinking about something from the future. So last week, I asked you to watch how your mind comes in and tries to tell you things. This week, I want you to look for how often your mind just takes you up and out of whatever you're doing. Gemini relates to the present moment. So, with me, take a deep breath right now and just come into the present moment. What do you notice right now in your experience? What does it feel like to be wearing the clothes that you're wearing? How do they feel in your body? What is the temperature of the air as you feel your hand waving through it? Are there any sounds that you can hear that you did not notice a few seconds ago? Are you breathing? Do you need a sip of water? What is your state of awareness currently? So, this is called sensing the field, where you just stop, even if only for a few seconds, to exactly what is happening right now. These kinds of practices don't require a lot. They're cheap, they're free. You don't have to go commit an hour or two. You don't even have to think that hard about what to do. It's simply as you are learning to work with the mind and you're beginning to see how powerful the mind is and how the mind just takes you on its very own roller coaster ride. Practices like this of just coming right back into the moment can be really helpful in bringing you back, grounding you, coming back to the self. So, one final thing to just tap into for a minute here is mental illness. We know that there are so many different kinds of mental illness. Some people are born with it, some people come into it. Sometimes people have mental illness that is due to drugs or alcohol. Some people will have it for life. Some people will only have it briefly for a month at a time in their lives. But the more that you are partnering with your own brain, the more that you are aware of the things that your brain does, the MO of your brain, the way that it will take you into anxiety or into stress, or it will help you to dissociate. All of these things are really important to just stay on top of, because it means that when there is something wrong with your brain, right? When there's something that has gone haywire or something that's not working very well, you catch it very quickly so that you aren't in misery for months and months or years and years before it finally clicks that there might be something that you need to seek some assistance with. Of course, mental illness is completely subjective. There's no way of saying this is what defines it and this is what does not define it. But what I'm saying here is the more you know about the way that your own brain works, the easier it is to recognize when something's off, whether it's some anxiety or depression creeping in, or it's some sort of chemical imbalance that starts to show itself, or maybe it's even just not knowing how to communicate very well. And that's not a mental illness. That is just simply understanding your own limitations and your own capacities, because we are in a time where we're asked and tasked to be shifting and changing and coming into more awareness. So, gone are the days when people just suffered through something without having any sort of support or knowledge that there could be help. We are here now in a time period where there's so much help available, but the first step is recognizing that we need it. And this is part of why we partner with our bodies, as we talked about in Taurus season. We get really intimate with everything that's happening in our physical system. And now in Gemini season, we're working to become more intimate with everything that's happening in our mental system. So you see how this works. This is really just about developing a deeper sense of awareness. And with every passing year, hopefully that awareness gets deeper and deeper. And then eventually you get to a place where you know yourself really well, and you don't have to go seeking outside assistance as much, and you don't have to be in a state of dissociation as often, and you certainly don't have to be enduring pain, suffering, agony, anxiety, depression in the same way that you might have in your less conscious days. All right, let's talk about the astrology of the week. All right, so we're beginning this week with Mercury entering Gemini. That brings us to 4 placements currently in Gemini. We have Sun, Venus, Jupiter, and Mercury. There's a lot of air in the sky right now. There's really a dominance of air. And air is the mental, the thinking, the overthinking. Gemini also rules the media. And like we've been talking about, it rules the way that the mind takes in information and uses it or distorts it. So know that as Mercury is entering into Gemini, it is at home here. It's very strong here. It can make overthinking or ruminating a little bit louder. It's also coming in to make a conjunction with Jupiter. Mercury and Jupiter, remember, are planets that oppose one another. Jupiter rules Sagittarius and Mercury rules Gemini. So when these two meet, there has to be that bringing into balance that I talked about a few weeks ago in the Sagittarius Gemini episode, where we're trying to balance the information that is right in front of us with the teachings and the belief systems that we've developed over the long term. And we're trying to make sense of it. You might experience some of that this week. We also move pretty quickly into a cazimi where the planet Venus meets with the sun. That's not going to happen until June 4th. This is an interesting energy. You'll hear astrologers talk about this in different ways, but I like to look at it like this. Imagine that in order to see Venus, you have to look directly at the sun. And when you look directly at the sun, you become blinded. So when we're looking at our Venus qualities that relate to our money, our values, our sense of beauty, our desires for pleasure, and of course, the inverse of those things, feeling like we don't have enough money or feeling like we're not allowed pleasure or we are lacking a sense of self-confidence. When Venus meets with the sun, it's almost a moment of pause where you have to let your eyes come back into focus again. So these big Venus questions that we've all been grappling with over the last few years around realigning with what is actually important instead of what we are fed. And we know that Gemini is one of the rulers of the media. We can also look at Neptune as a ruler of media, especially the confusing parts of media, which, let's be honest, that's pretty much all media at this point. There's so much that we are fed around what is valuable. But if we close our eyes for a minute and pause and really tune in to whether those things are truly important, they're not. So this week can be another turning point for you in understanding what to cast off, any beliefs that you have around your abilities to make money, your financial situation and what it needs to look like versus what it really looks like, your relationship to your physical beauty, to your body, to what you desire. There's a recalibration because ideally, when your eyes come back into focus, what you want to look at are the things that are in total alignment with you, not with the collective, not with the companies that are trying to sell you things, and certainly not with some sort of distorted story about what your life is supposed to look like. On the 6th, we move pretty quickly into the new moon in Gemini. If you're watching this on YouTube, you'll be able to see these charts. You'll see that the sun, Venus, and the moon are all at 16 degrees. So, what's interesting about this is, according to the step system that I've been dabbling with, that was developed by an astrologer, Christopher Witecki, the 16th degree is a degree of surrender. And so we look at this combination of energies, the sun, the sense of self, the moon, your deep emotions, and Venus, your value system. And we know that all three of those are in the environment of Gemini. So we're thinking, we're processing, we are communicating. And then we apply this idea of surrender. So the question for this new moon for you is, what do you need to surrender to? And it will relate to those Venus insights that you get from that Cazimi. And it will relate to the energy of a new moon, which is about planting seeds for what's to come. This moon is also squaring Saturn. There is a need for you to really set a strong foundation for what you're seeing. A lot of times with these mutable signs, there can be a lot of thinking about it and a lot of talking about it, but not a lot of action and not a lot of cementing it in. So make sure that you're not getting distracted and just pulled away by the tidal wave of information that the media, and we're seeing so many planets right now with this big pile up in Gemini and a big pile up here of power planets, Saturn and Neptune in Pisces. You just want to be careful what you are taking to be true. With the introduction of AI, and AI is only going to become bigger and bigger, but the introduction of AI is really showing us that you can create anything and it can be a complete illusion. So this is a time period in general where you want to be really aware of the illusions that are out there. And I always jokingly say that the powers that be are interested in us spending our money, and they will feed us any illusion. And we give them our money because we believe that illusion. So this is also you reality checking. Saturn's going to help you with that. Reality checking. Is this true? Does this feel true in my gut? That's our North Node in Aries. Does this feel true in my gut? And that is your leading question. And that should really be a good leading question for many, many years to come. On the 8th, we're going to have Venus coming into a square with Saturn. On the 9th, we're going to have the Sun coming into a square with Saturn. So this is really a good week in general to continue to reality check. Saturn's very helpful for that. We also have Mars entering into the sign of Taurus. That's going to be on Sunday. Remember that Mars is your planet of action and drive. So it changes energies into Taurus and it becomes less impulsive and more about staying the course. So whatever it is that you've learned over the past few weeks, as Mars had to cross over the North Node and meet with Chiron, whatever you've learned about your convictions, the things that you are willing to go to battle for, the things that have irritated you that you realized were actually just old wounds, whatever work has been generated over the past few weeks, know that now is the time to really settle in and tend to that particular garden. And now, as Mars is in Taurus, now you get to roll up your sleeves and get your hands dirty. All right. I hope this was helpful. I will see you all next week. Thanks so much for spending time with me. You can find me all over the internet or at electraastrology.com. If you enjoyed this podcast, share it with your friends and help them discover us. And if you are the kind of person who likes to leave reviews, I'd greatly appreciate it.